Margaret, I went through our accounts this morning. You've been bleeding us dry for months. Starting today, you ask me before you spend a single dime. This is MY retirement or burning through. He said it the way he always said important things, standing in the kitchen doorway with his arms crossed, chin lifted, like he was addressing a quarterly review meeting. I was unloading the dishwasher at the time. I set down a coffee mug, turned around, and looked at my husband of 37 years. I smiled. I said, "All right, Gerald." He blinked. He had clearly expected something else. Tears, maybe, or an argument he could win. Instead, I just turned back to the dishwasher and kept stacking plates. What he didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that 2 weeks later, when his entire family arrived for Thanksgiving dinner and he stood up at the head of the table to announce that his wife had spent his retirement into the ground, the room would go so quiet you could hear the candles flickering. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Welcome to Twisted LMR Stories. I share real-life experiences here every day, and I would truly appreciate it if you hit subscribe and gave this video a like. Now, let me tell you how it all began. I think you'll want to stay until the very end. My name is Margaret. I'm 63 years old. For nearly 4 decades, I have been a wife, a mother, a household manager, a part-time bookkeeper who quit her full-time position in 1994 when my husband's company transferred us to Atlanta and I decided, together with Gerald, that our children needed consistency more than a second income. I was good with numbers. I kept every receipt in a shoebox under the bathroom sink, a habit from my own mother, who raised 4 kids on a mill worker's salary and never once bounced a check. Gerald retired in September. 32 years as a structural engineer, good pension, solid 401k, the gold watch, and the handshake at the door. He came home on that Friday afternoon looking lighter than I had seen him in years. We had a nice dinner. He opened a bottle of wine we had been saving. I thought, finally, this is the beginning of something good. By October, something had shifted. He started watching the bank statements the way he used to watch football scores. Every morning, coffee in hand, scrolling through the app on his phone with a frown deepening across his forehead. At first I thought it was just an adjustment. The man had managed project budgets for 3 decades. Of course he would need something to manage at home. I gave him space. I was patient. Then came the comments. $68 at the grocery store, Margaret. What on earth did you buy? I bought food, Gerald. Why did you go to the pharmacy twice this week? Because I forgot the antacids the first time. This hair appointment is every 6 weeks. Can't you stretch it to 8? I did not answer that one. And then came the morning of the kitchen doorway speech. The retirement money speech. The ask me first speech. I smiled, said all right, and I started thinking. That evening, Gerald went to his workshop in the garage to organize his tools, his newest retirement hobby. I sat at the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and pulled up a spreadsheet. Not out of anger, not yet. More out of habit. Numbers had always calmed me down. I started with the obvious. The household operating costs. Groceries for 2 adults, one of whom ate steak 3 times a week and kept requesting the good. Everything, good coffee, good bread, the imported olive oil he had read about in a magazine. My average monthly grocery spend over the last year, $480. I had all 12 months of receipts. I always did. Utilities, electric, gas, water, internet, and the cable package Gerald needed for sports and the History Channel. My average, $310 a month. Down from what it would have been because I kept the thermostat at 68 and wore an extra sweater rather than argue about it. Household supplies, cleaning products, paper goods, laundry detergent. He had a preference there too. No fragrance on the fabric softener, the specific brand of dish soap, 3-ply toilet paper. $80 a month. Medical co-pays, prescriptions, and the supplements his doctor recommended. $120 a month between the 2 of us. Though Gerald's blood pressure medication alone was 60 of that. I typed for 2 hours. By the time Gerald came in from the garage smelling like WD-40 and sawdust, I had closed the laptop and was reading in the living room like nothing had happened. "What's for dinner?" he asked. "Whatever you make," I said pleasantly, turning a page. He stood in the doorway for a moment. Then he went and made himself a sandwich and watched television, and I kept reading, and in my head the numbers kept arranging themselves into rows. The next morning I woke up at 6, as I always did. I made coffee, real coffee, in the drip machine, the same way I had made it for 37 years. I set Gerald's mug on the counter with the creamer beside it. Then I sat down with my own cup and my laptop and kept building the spreadsheet. I went further back. 10 years. Over the last 10 years, I had managed every bill, every renewal, every service appointment for this house. The roof inspection in 2016 that caught a leak before it became a disaster, I had scheduled that and driven over to let the inspector in. The negotiation with the cable company every 18 months when the promotional rate expired. That was me, 45 minutes on the phone each time, saving us about $300 a year. The twice-yearly HVAC service, the pest control contract, the homeowner's insurance renewal I had shopped around for in 2019 and found a better rate that saved us $412 annually. I had also worked part-time as a bookkeeper for a small dental practice from 2008 to 2019 when my younger sister got sick and I stopped to help care for her. I had earned $22,400 in my last full year. When my sister recovered and I was ready to go back, COVID happened. By the time things settled, the practice had hired someone full-time and I was 61. I had not pushed hard to find something new. Gerald had never asked me to. I thought about that now. I pulled up a website that calculated replacement cost for household labor. I had used it once before, years ago, out of curiosity. A full-time housekeeper in Georgia, $28,000 to $32,000 a year. A personal chef for 2 meals a day, easily $40,000. A household manager who paid bills, handled contractors, managed schedules, maintained records, $35,000 to $45,000. These were not my numbers. These were industry averages from 3 separate sources. I was not a housekeeper, a chef, and a household manager. I was a wife. I did not want to be paid. That was not the point. The point was, Gerald had stood in my kitchen and told me that I had been spending his money, his retirement, as though the 37 years I had spent making it possible for him to build that retirement without ever worrying about whether the lights would be on, whether the children had dentist appointments, whether the mortgage was late, as though none of that had any value at all. I saved the spreadsheet, made a second cup of coffee, and began planning. I did not plan revenge. I am 63 years old and I have no interest in revenge. I planned clarity. Sometimes, I have found, the kindest thing you can do for someone who has forgotten something important is to show it to them plainly, without drama, without raised voices, just the facts laid out where they cannot be ignored. Gerald's family was coming for Thanksgiving. His brother, his sister-in-law, their grown children. His sister, who lived 2 hours north and made the trip every year. 11 people total. Every Thanksgiving for the past 22 years, since we had the largest house and I had the patience for it, I had hosted. I knew exactly what that cost. The turkey alone, a good heritage bird, because Gerald's brother was particular, ran about $90. The sides, sweet potatoes, green beans with the shallots and almonds, the corn pudding, the rolls made from scratch, the 2 kinds of pie, another $140 at least. The good tablecloth ironed and pressed, the china that lived in the cabinet 11 months a year and came out for this one day. The flowers for the centerpiece, the extra bottle of bourbon Gerald's brother liked after dinner. 22 years. I added it up. Conservative estimate, $260 per year, some years more. 22 years came to $5,720. Just Thanksgiving. I thought about Christmas and Easter and the birthday cakes I had made for Gerald's mother every July until she passed in 2018. I thought about the retirement party I had organized for Gerald in September, the catered dinner for 40 people, the slideshow I had put together from photographs I had been keeping in an album for 30 years, the cake from the French bakery downtown that cost $220 but that he had cried a little over when he saw it. I had paid for that party from our joint account. He had written the check for the venue and called it his treat. The week before Thanksgiving, I made a decision. I was not going to do anything dramatic. I was not going to make a scene or deliver a speech. I was simply going to stop asking for permission to buy groceries. When Gerald reminded me the Wednesday before the holiday to run my shopping list by him first, I said very gently, "Gerald, I've been buying Thanksgiving groceries since 1996. I think I have a handle on it." He frowned. "That's not the point. The point is the budget." "I understand," I said. "I'll keep the receipts." He looked at me like he was trying to figure out whether I was agreeing with him or not. I was not sure myself. I did the shopping. I kept every receipt in the shoebox, as I always had. I cooked for 2 days, the pies on Wednesday, everything else on Thursday morning starting at 7. The house smelled like butter and rosemary and something deeply familiar when Gerald's family arrived at 1 in the afternoon. His brother Warren came in first and said what he always said, "Margaret, this place smells incredible. Nobody does Thanksgiving like you do." His wife hugged me at the door. Gerald's sister, Diane, brought wine and kissed me on the cheek. The grandchildren ran straight for the kitchen. We ate at 2 o'clock. The table looked beautiful. Everything came out right. The turkey was perfect. The corn pudding had the right texture. The pies were golden. Gerald sat at the head of the table, and he was proud. I could see it, the particular pride of a man whose house is full and whose table is laden. The kind of pride that does not think very hard about where any of it came from. Dessert was on the table, and the bourbon had been opened when Gerald cleared his throat. I do not know, even now, exactly what was in his mind when he decided to say what he said next. Perhaps he had been wanting to say it for weeks, and the warmth of the room and the fullness of his stomach made him feel generous enough to share it. Perhaps he thought it would land as a funny complaint, the kind husbands made and everyone laughed about. "I want to say something," he began, and the table quieted. "Since I retired, I've been taking a closer look at our finances. And I'll tell you, Margaret here has expensive taste." He smiled at me, the kind of smile that is supposed to take the edge off words that have an edge. I went through the accounts, and I nearly fell out of my chair. I've told her she needs to clear things with me before she spends. We're living on a fixed income now, people. Retirement money doesn't grow back. There was a pause. Warren put down his bourbon glass. Diane, who was sitting to my left, turned slowly toward her brother. "Gerald," Diane said. Her voice was very even. "What exactly did Margaret spend that concerned you?" Gerald seemed pleased that someone was asking. He named the grocery bills, the pharmacy runs, the hair appointments, the $200 I had spent on a winter coat in October. Diane listened to all of it. Then she said, "And who bought the groceries for the table we just ate from?" "Well, Margaret did. But, and who cooked all of this?" "She enjoys cooking, Diane. That's not the—" "Gerald." Diane set down her fork. "I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to think before you answer. When is the last time you went to the grocery store alone? When is the last time you paid a utility bill, scheduled a repair, took a car in for service, or organized anything in this house that wasn't your workshop?" The table was completely still. Warren's grandchildren had gone quiet in the way children do when they sense that the adults are saying something that matters. Gerald opened his mouth. Then he closed it. "I'm not trying to embarrass you," Diane said. "I'm asking because I watched this woman manage your entire life for 37 years while you built your career. I watched her move 4 times for your job transfers without a single complaint. I watched her give up her own position to raise your children. And I watched her put together that retirement party for you 2 months ago that made you cry. She paused, and now you're telling her she needs permission to buy a coat. The silence stretched. Warren picked up his glass. He did not say anything. He looked at Gerald with an expression that was not unkind but was not comfortable either. I had not said a word. I sat with my hands folded in my lap, and I let it happen, because this was not something I had staged. Diane had arrived at this on her own, the way the truth tends to arrive when it has been waiting long enough. After the guests left that evening, Gerald washed dishes without being asked. He did not say much. I put away the good china and folded the tablecloth, and he moved around the kitchen quietly, and we did not speak about what Diane had said. Not that night, but I knew it had landed. I could see it in the way he moved, careful and deliberate, like a man who has realized he is standing on ice and is not sure how thick it is. 2 days later, I sat down at the kitchen table with my laptop and my shoebox. I brought Gerald a cup of coffee, set it in front of him, and sat across from him. "I want to show you something," I said. I opened the spreadsheet. I did not say it dramatically. I did not say, "Look at everything you never noticed." I just turned the screen toward him and walked him through it quietly, the way I used to explain accounts to clients at the dental practice. Line items, categories, dates, totals, the household operating costs over the last 12 months, $11,480, paid by me, from the joint account I funded, first from my bookkeeping income, and then from my personal savings I had moved over quietly when my hours were cut. Maintenance, repairs, and service calls I had coordinated over the last 10 years, I had a conservative estimate of $6,300 in labor costs alone, not counting the money I had saved by catching problems early. The roof, the HVAC, the water heater I had noticed making a sound and had a plumber look at before it failed. The retirement party, $4,100, including the venue deposit he had paid, and the remainder I had covered and never mentioned. 22 years of Thanksgiving, $5,720. Gifts for his family, his mother's birthdays, his brother's children, and now grandchildren, Christmas, graduations, I had kept those receipts too. In the last 10 years alone, $3,840. I slid a printed page across the table. The total at the bottom was not a small number. Gerald looked at it for a long time. He did not say it was wrong. He could not, because I had the receipts stacked neatly in the shoebox beside my laptop, and he knew I did not make things up. "I didn't know," he said finally. "I know you didn't," I said. "I thought." He stopped. He stopped. He tried again. "I thought the money was just going places. I thought you were being careless. I have never been careless with money in my life," I said. "You know that. You've just never looked." He was quiet for a long time. The coffee sat cooling between his hands. "I owe you an apology," he said. "You do," I said, "but I'd rather have a conversation than an apology." And we had it. Not in one sitting. These things never happen in one sitting. Not after 37 years of anything. We had it over several evenings at the same kitchen table with the same pot of coffee, going through things that should probably have been said years earlier. How invisible I had felt in the last 2 months. How his retirement had somehow translated, in his mind, into ownership of everything, as though stepping back from his job had meant stepping into the seat of authority over our shared life. How I had spent 37 years making the architecture of our daily existence so seamless that he had forgotten it required any work at all. Invisible infrastructure, I told him one night. That's what I've been. The whole system runs and nobody thinks about the pipes. He did not have a good answer for that. But he listened, which was more than he had been doing. The changes were not immediate and they were not perfect. Gerald was 66 years old and had been doing things a certain way for a long time. He forgot, sometimes. He slipped back into asking me to clear purchases with him, and I reminded him, calmly, that we had talked about this. He learned to shop, He started cooking twice a week, nothing elaborate. Eggs, sandwiches, once a surprisingly decent pot of soup he found a recipe for online, and he learned to leave the kitchen clean afterward. He looked at the spreadsheet again a few weeks later on his own. He told me he had been going over the numbers. He did not have anything specific to say about them. He just wanted me to know he had looked. What I kept from all of it, the thing I wrote down in the back of my journal because I wanted to remember it, was not about the money. The money was never really about money. It was about being seen. 37 years of showing up, day after day, doing the invisible work, and then having the man you built a life with imply that you had been living off of him. I thought about the women I knew who had heard similar things. My neighbor, who told me once that her husband had said she didn't really work because she worked from home. My friend from my book club, who handled every aspect of the family finances, while her husband said he didn't understand bills. These were not careless women. These were competent, tireless women who had become so good at making things run smoothly that the people around them had stopped seeing the effort. I was 63 years old, and I was done being invisible. I started going back to work, not bookkeeping, not for a practice that might not want a 63-year-old in the chair. I had a friend who ran a small nonprofit and needed someone to handle their financial records 2 days a week. It was not the same as a full salary. It was enough to matter. I had my own money coming in, deposited into an account that was mine, and I spent it without asking permission, and it was very, very satisfying. I told Gerald about the account. I showed it to him, because I was not interested in secrets. I told him I needed it not for the money itself, but for what it represented. He nodded slowly. He said he understood. I was not entirely sure he did, but I thought he was trying. Thanksgiving came around again the following year. Diane arrived and hugged me at the door, and the first thing she said quietly in my ear was, "How are things?" And I told her, honestly, that they were better. She squeezed my hand. Gerald stood up after dinner that year, too. I watched him from across the table, half expecting something. Old reflexes. He raised his glass and said, "I want to thank Margaret for all of this, and not just for today." He looked at me in a way that was direct and a little uncomfortable. The way honest things often are. For a lot of years that I didn't pay enough attention to. I'm trying to do better. It was not a grand speech. It was a man in his late 60s admitting something true in front of the people who mattered to him, which is as hard as it sounds at any age. I accepted it the way I accept most things, graciously, without making it smaller than it was, or larger than it needed to be. I will tell you what I know now that I did not know clearly enough before. The work of building a home, a life, a family, the cooking and the scheduling and the bill paying and the coordinating and the caring. That work has a value whether or not anyone sees it. The invisibility is not evidence that it doesn't matter. The invisibility is what you get when you do it so well, for so long, that it looks like it runs itself. It does not run itself. I run it. And I am 63 years old and I know my own worth to the dollar, if it comes to that. I have the spreadsheet. I have the receipts in the shoebox under the bathroom sink, organized by year, going back 22 years. I know exactly what I have contributed, and I will never again let anyone make me feel like a liability for the work of a lifetime. If you are sitting somewhere right now listening to this and you recognize something in what I've said, I want you to hear me clearly. Your work counts. Your time counts. The meals, the appointments, the coordination, the maintenance, the worry, the planning, it all counts, even when no one is counting it but you. Especially then. Know your value. Keep your receipts. And never let anyone tell you that the life you built together was theirs alone. I'm so glad you were here with me today. If this story spoke to you, please give it a like and subscribe to Twisted LMR Stories so you don't miss what comes next. Leave a comment below and tell me what city you're watching from. I love knowing where all of you are. And now 2 of my most listened to stories are going to appear on your screen. Choose whichever one calls to you. I'll see you there.